Back on MorningLine, thanks for joining us. Final segment with our guest as we're talking about the ordinance on immigration. Bob Mendez, one of the co-sponsors of this in the Metro Council. Thanks for coming on. Lines open 737-7587, and lots of comments coming on Facebook where we're streaming it right now. And, I said, that's going back and forth on Facebook. A lot of people saying, no, they don't like this. By the way, we're taking calls. We're all over, Middle Tennessee and up into parts of Kentucky and the like. So we could be getting calls everywhere. Not sure how representative this is of Metro Nashville alone. And then we're taking calls as they come in, by the way, folks. We're not screening or whatever. It's if you think some taking one side or the other, I'm not setting that up. Let's go to Grady. Grady, good morning.
Good morning, Nicholas. Now, the law is the law. And if these people are coming in illegally, then that's keeping somebody else from coming in naturally. Now, my grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee, and, there was a case where two Hispanics had killed the mother and her daughter in Antioch. And, because the jury of their peers, if I went to court, I couldn't get a jury of Cherokees. And they turned the fellas loose, but we've got to have law enforcement, whether it's federal or whether it's local. If we don't, then we're asking for turmoil. And I'll hang up with your comments.
Okay. I think some people, I don't know if Grady was going to go this far, but worry that if something like this passes, all of a sudden, it is viewed one way or the other by those who are not here legally as a sanctuary city, and it'll draw even more to Nashville. Right or wrong, good or bad, I don't know how you view that.
I agree that some people think that. I don't think that's the case. I think all of us have got the experience where we move where we think our family is going to do the best economically, and the fact that we're a booming Sunbelt city that's growing at an incredible rate because of the progressive policies we've had for better than a quarter of a century. I think that's going to dictate more about who moves here and who doesn't than anything to do with this bill one way or the other.
Let's go to Sarah. Sarah, good morning. Hi, Sarah. Good morning, Sarah. What's on your mind?
My position is the reason that we started allowing immigration in the first place was to build our country with different types of people. But for now, it seems that our country is starting to become overly populated. I think that immigration should really just stop, because I think that everybody here is being naturally born is already overpopulating the country. So why are we still taking immigrants unless it's, a life and death position?
Yeah, it's refugees is what she's referring to there. Well, it is, very hard to, unless you're a refugee, to become a citizen in this country these days. It is hard.
It is hard, and those issues that the caller was talking about are above my pay grade. Those are all federal issues that the Congress and the President need to deal with. We have literally no control over them. Mm-hmm. This bill, while it invokes these bigger issues, is so narrow. All it says is that beyond living up to every single federal and state obligation on immigration, we will choose to not collect information about immigration and citizenship in order for us to be safe and have a better functioning city, because we can't do anything about federal immigration issues. We just can't influence that discussion.
As I'm scrolling through the Facebook, clearly it seems like there are many more people at least expressing themselves on here against it. And I'm wondering, even with what you just said there, maybe some of them even understand that it's still going to allow you to enforce state and federal law, but perhaps they view this as, we're done bending over at all for any of this, and bending backwards saying, that's okay, or that this is the beginning of maybe more coming later. But I'm just wondering, because I think some of them may understand what you just said, and they still don't like it.
And I don't honestly think there's much I'm going to say to change their mind. I mean, if we talked macroeconomically, you know, the idea that we've hit maturity as a nation and therefore shut it down, no more immigration. First of all, that argument's been made in America, you know, as early as the late 1800s to keep Irish and Italian immigrants and Catholic immigrants out of the country. The same argument was made back then. And I would further note, you know, there's countries in Europe and Japan also whose population is expected to fall because they're not taking in immigrants. You know, we are a mature nation, and with the baby boom generation being the biggest one out there, we actually can't survive in the next 100 years going forward economically without bringing in immigrants. Yes, we need to do it legally. Yes, we need to figure out this horrible mess that the federal government has created, but all that's beyond what we're talking about on this ordinance. All we're talking about is loving our neighbor, making sure our neighbors are comfortable for their safety and our safety after we take care of our obligations that we owe to the federal government and the state.
Let's go to Randy. Randy, good morning. Hi, Randy.
I got a question for the councilman.
Sure.
Why isn't he addressing the fact that ICE was here arresting murderers and rapists and other types of criminals and deporting them back?
I'm happy to address that. That just wasn't the case. That
was the case. They were here taking murderers and rapists back, you know, into custody so they can be deported back to their country.
There have been, yeah. I mean, I'm sure among those deported have been some pretty bad characters. Now, I'm wondering if they had warrants for those or not.
So, I mean, this gets very complicated. The caller's really real underlying suggestion is that somehow we're getting in the way of ICE, and that's not the case. I've said repeatedly that the bill would have us live up to every obligation we have to ICE, and there's nothing we could do to stop the ICE roundups that happened. Now, factually, there might have been some, you know, quote unquote bad people in the mix, but you know, one of them was somebody who fled Saddam Hussein with his family from northern Iraq, doesn't speak the language in Iraq, his capital Baghdad isn't of the same religion as the people in the capital of Baghdad, has been in the United States since then, had selling alcohol to a minor charge that's pushing 20 years old, served his obligation to Metro for having violated that crime, and is now being deported, you know, 15, 18 years later. Now, I have no dispute with ICE gets to enforce our immigration laws, and they should do it. But the fact of the matter is, if we want to talk about a public safety issue, that gentleman was not creating a public safety hazard. He just wasn't. There might be others that were, but to make the sweeping statement that all these people who are being deported by ICE are rapists and murderers and gangsters is just wrong.
Yeah. We should say again that we invited other members of the council. Now, it's passed on 2 readings, of course, with a 3rd one coming up, but some of the opposition, we just did not hear back from them. We did have Sheriff Hall on, though, last week, who stated that if this ordinance passes, he's, in his mind, not sure he'll be beholden to it, and he probably will still be business as usual. And that is really what the ordinance seems to focus on, is the Sheriff's Department primarily, and whether or not they do the courtesy of working with ICE, going beyond maybe some of what the federal law requires.
Courtesy / violate 4th Amendment rights.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to pledge my support for this legislation for a number of reasons. Immigration is an integral part of our national and our local economy. In Tennessee, immigrants are twice as likely to start a business, and they are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. And I also wanted to say I support this legislation because at the end of the day, this is ICE's bill, and they aren't paying it. They're putting their bill on the backs of local Nashvillians. And so for a number of other reasons, but those are the 2 main reasons I absolutely support this bill.
All right. Thank you for your call. Again, we said earlier that one way or the other this bill it's not going to be either a huge cost savings or an expense if the ordinance passes.
I think that's right.
Okay, probably not along those lines. All right, so we're looking at July 6th being the third and final. If it passes on third reading, it becomes an ordinance.
If the mayor signs it.
If the mayor signs it, and indications are, of course, that Megan Barry supports this, correct?
I don't think she stated a position.
She hasn't stated, well, okay, maybe she hasn't specifically on this, but you've heard some of her comments about wanting this to be a welcoming city.
Right.
And so you're guessing maybe. Perhaps she hasn't said definitively. Now, between now and July 6th, we hope to likely get a legal opinion from Metro Legal on whether or not they think this ordinance, is up to snuff. And then maybe as well from the state attorney general, whatever role that might play on whether he views it as being legal.
I expect Metro Legal. I just don't know about the state attorney general.
Okay, yeah. And now if Metro Legal comes back and says, well, there may be some legal issues here, do you go forward anyway and say, well, we'll let the courts sort it out?
As we've been discussing, these issues are so complex. It's hard to guess what Metro Legal would have a problem with. I would imagine the issue that they're focused most on is whether the ordinance is binding on the sheriff's department.
Right.
And that's sort of a separate issue about whether these detentions on a voluntary basis without a warrant pass constitutional muster. As I mentioned, there's new case law as recent as 10, 12 days ago about this subject, so the landscape has been changing about whether it's appropriate with this ordinance or without it.
Yeah, it evolves at that point as they look at it. So, okay, we'll have that. Any other issue at hand that, are there a lot of council persons on the fence to your mind as we've seen these? I know there were some that abstained from the last vote, maybe waiting to see. I don't know.
I think 3 of the 4 abstaining people were, council members were lawyers, and they said that they wanted to hear about the answers to the legal questions before they made a decision.
Okay, so basically waiting for the legal, you've got 3 or 4 only that really abstained, and then the third vote. Is it your belief that it will pass?
I think it will.
You think it will pass? All right, listen, Councilman Mendez, thank you for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
I wish some of your colleagues would have joined you this morning. Again, we opened up that invitation to as many as we could. We had a lot of callers, and as I said, if you look on Facebook, and it probably doesn't come as a surprise, I don't know where all the callers, but the vast majority, at least here, posting they don't like the idea. We've had some callers going both ways, but a lot of passion on this issue.
No doubt about it.
So thank you for coming on, sir.
Thanks a lot.
We'll watch and see what happens on July 6th. We'll take a break, be back with a programming note right after this.